Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. We have an interesting agenda this afternoon, a couple of very important presentations. And I have no announcements to start it off, and so we'll go immediately to item number 1 on the agenda, which is the Oakmont Gardens presentation regarding assisted living and memory care. And we have several people, and I don't know who the lead spokesman is going to be, but Scott, are you going to get it started?
No, I think Carol is right here.
Yes, I am, and I've got to go get my papers over there, and I'll be right with you, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. While Carol's doing that, Scott, do you mind just introducing each of the members of the team that are here?
I'm going to do that as part of mine.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
I was trying to get everybody signed in, and so I ended up with my materials over there at the table. And if you haven't signed in, we very much welcome your names. Someone indicated a concern that they would be solicited, and we will not solicit you. We just want to be able to demonstrate to the city the attendees that we had and the number of attendees that we had at the meeting today. So if you'll give us your name, you'll give us an email. I might want to send you something talking about the next meeting, but if you don't want to do that and would just sign in, we would appreciate it. And I promised a gentleman in the back that I'd bring the sign-in sheet over to him, and I haven't gotten there yet, but I haven't forgotten. So, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. We do understand that this is a workshop, and as we do that, we want to present some conceptual plans for a assisted living and memory care community that will be built on a vacant piece of land here in Oakmont. I will get into the details of that, but I'd like to start with something I want to share with you. As you celebrated your 50th anniversary here of Oakmont Village, I was quite impressed with the book that was put together, and in that book was an ode, Oakmont in the Valley of the Moon. And I wanted to read a couple of paragraphs out of that because I think it sort of sets the tone for what we want to do in your wonderful community. We live in this most special place, clearly best by God's good grace. People come from far and wide. They've searched across the countryside. In life's great rush, they've earned enough, grown past the envy, eschew the frenzy, declare they want a change of pace, decide they may want to quit the race. And now it's time to here retire, a dream to which they've long aspired. Enjoy the green, the walks, the sky, with gentle mountains standing by. Sounds of quiet bring sense of peace. At night, the light from starlight creeps. Turn off the lights and quietly wait. Take some time to contemplate. Before too long, in fact quite soon, that famous moon will surely loom. Gently penetrate the gloom and illuminate your living room. There's no place like it you will find, such friendly people, smart and kind. That is Oakmont, and there's still room for you and ours and our full moon. And as we think about coming into your community, we thought that that was a great introduction for us. And I also read a little bit about H.N. Berger, the original developer of Oakmont, and he made an early determination that he knew the mighty oak, known for strength, endurance, and everlasting vitality, would be a fitting symbol for the community that he named Oakmont. And as part of that, we're going to show you our presentation called The Oaks at Stonebridge. As part of that, we will do a project overview. And what we will describe, and I hope you can all see this, if not, please feel free to relocate your chairs. And as I start, also note that there are cookies and ice water and iced tea in the back of the room, so please feel free to help yourself. So in the overview, here's what we're going to talk about. The Clearwater Senior Living and MBK Senior Living partnership that is proposing our assisted living and memory care community. We're going to do a property overview. We'll talk about the objectives we have for the site and the project. We'll demonstrate the residential character that we want to ensure. And we'll talk about the conditions affecting our use of the land and describe what we hope you will believe to be the benefits to Oakmont. So company background. We've brought together two very outstanding companies to create the Oaks at Woodbridge. And the first is Clearwater Senior Living. And since 1966, the principals have been actively engaged in high-quality senior living communities, and they've been doing that nationwide. And Tony Ferrero, who's here with me today, please stand, Tony. Tony is the CEO of Clearwater Senior Living, and he oversees the project teams and all design through the entitlement and development process as we go through both your association's review process and also the process at the City of Santa Rosa. Also included, we have our architect here, Bo Russ, and Bo is the president of his architectural firm. He's been doing design for senior communities for 35 years and a partner that we value greatly. Sorry your name didn't get up there, Bus. Don't know what happened there. We call him Bo Russ, a Bus. And then I provide the entitlement and community engagement services on behalf of both CSL and MBK. Now you may know MBK as the owner and operator of Oakmont Gardens. And also here with us today is their executive director, Scott Bissey, who may be familiar to most of you. And they operate all over the United States, mostly in the Western US, and they provide both independent, assisted, and memory care communities. And I think you all know that they're doing a pretty good job right here in Oakmont. Did my mic go off? No, here it is, thank you. And we thought it was important to mention that MBK's mission is, quote, to exceed the quality, service, and care expectations of those we serve. We hope that you feel the same way. So our history and overview, we are in the sort of last remaining development area, as I understand it, in Oakmont, and it's called the Meadows at Oakmont subdivision. Within that, you've probably seen the construction underway, 15 acres with improvements currently in process. There are 36 single-family homes. They're extending Oak Bridge Road. There's a detention basin there to ensure that the drainage is appropriate. And approximately 3.3 acres has been reserved for an assisted living and memory care community, which we've named the Oaks at Stonebridge. The overall developer is Hunter Redwood Equities Investments, LLC, and we know they had come to review their project with you earlier. They've been through the city process, and it's now under construction, and they will be bringing brand new single-family homes to the Oakmont Village area. So here's an aerial. We couldn't get one since construction started, but I would orient you to our site. This is Oakmont Drive, and this is where Stonebridge will be connected and is under construction, as you see here. And the site actually goes all the way out to the Sonoma Highway. Our portion of the site is outlined here in yellow and is immediately adjacent to both the Oakmont Gardens and to the office of the Oakmont Village Association Management. So the recorded track map that created the parcels that we're going to develop include these lots for single-family homes in this area. And again, this is Oakmont and this is Stonebridge. And these are the two parcels, and we will be combining those to create the memory and assisted living. So within this recorded track map, we have dropped in an illustration of our conceptual site plan, recognizing that this plan has to go through review by your board of directors, and it has to go through the review of the city of Santa Rosa, both the planning commission as well as their design review board. So we have quite a process ahead of us, but we have to have a plan to begin that process with. And so we put a lot of thought into how we can be compatible with our adjacent development. So what are our project objectives? A purpose-built assisted living and memory care community. Purpose-built means it hasn't been remodeled to meet that. It hasn't been something else before. It means we're going to be building it brand new, specifically for the very state-of-the-art needs for the assisted living and memory care, and what we believe responds to growing needs in Oakmont. We want to provide a high-quality project, and we will make sure that it's in a safe and secure residential setting. We're going to provide connectivity, which I'll show you on the plan, but connectivity with Oakmont Gardens to allow for increased pedestrian activity. We see a lot of people walking their dogs in the driveways, and now we're going to have some walkways in our project to enhance that walkability. And we also want to create a sensitive design to address the character of the surrounding neighborhoods. So what does it consist of? It consists of a assisted living and memory care, approximately 3.3 acres. And we're going to have 54 assisted living residences, and that, of course, as you know, provides assistance with daily living, including meals, and 24 memory care residences, and that's secure assisted living for those with memory impairment. And we do know that a number of the residents in Oakmont Village are driving their loved ones a long distance in order to provide for memory care. And we also know that Oakmont Gardens right now, their assisted living units within their building are 97% occupied, and they can't address the demand that they have here in the community. So we believe that there is a demonstrated need for what we're proposing. But our outdoor features include private and secure open space so that the memory care residents can have open space in a secure and supervised setting, as well as public open space, greenhouse, and walking trails on our site. Interior amenities include dining rooms, a bistro, an arts and crafts room, wellness services, so important as all of us age in place and do well, and also a fitness gym. So while we have not designed the project specifically, and this is a preliminary and conceptual approach, we want to give you some images of what we've done in other places to demonstrate the quality of our settings. So public gathering spaces with a fireplace, comfortable, attractive furniture, quiet areas, activity areas, and group areas. So the conceptual site plan we've put into sort of an aerial photo to demonstrate our design. And again, this is Oakmont. This is the new Stonebridge Road. This is an extension of Pine Valley Drive, and there will be new homes that back up to our site. These are the existing Oakmont Gardens, and this again is the office building. So, yeah, not quite ready. So we have a two-story component of the project, of the community, that is for assisted living with an enclosed courtyard with walking area. And that two-story is only adjacent to the office building. adjacent to Oakmont is the one-story, which is the memory care. And here is their private, secured, open space. So we are preserving oak trees. We're providing access into a drop-off area. We're providing parking for both staff and guests. And we're also going to be providing a connection to Oakmont Gardens that will allow for a pedestrian access to these trails that go around the site. There's a setback for the new proposed residence that will be nicely landscaped. There is landscaping on the rear of the building adjacent to Oakmont Gardens. All of this will be landscaped. This will be a detention basin as required by the developer to complete, and that provides a generous setback from Oakmont Drive. And we want to create a very nice setting, a very nice entrance, a very nice sense of arrival from Stonebridge. And this is an image of what we're looking at and will be precisely designing as we go forward. But it could occur here or here in a way that reminds everybody of the Stonebridge look that we're trying to achieve. So from a conceptual elevation standpoint, this would be about what we are thinking of, the kinds of architectural style that we would be using, and this look would be at about this location on our plan. So a conceptual elevation. The other conceptual elevation would be this area, which is a close-up of where the drop-off and the entry is. And again, conceptual with lots of landscaping and lots of architectural detail in the building. Another example, conceptual elevations. So how do we preserve that residential character? In part by setbacks, architecture, and the landscaping. So under the landscape project setbacks, the two-story building will be 65 to 70 feet from Oakmont, a very generous setback. The one-story building will be 60 feet away from the proposed homes, and the one-story building will be 65 to 70 feet away from Oakmont Gardens. The architecture will be characterized by gabled roofs, overhanging eaves, and exposed rafters along this idea here. Again, lots of articulation and architectural interest. Then we're going to be preserving existing oaks, and we'll be providing drought-resistant and ornamental landscaping, as well as the walking trails that I described. And here are some examples of walking trails. We're so pleased to see all of the walking that's going on in Oakmont right now, and we will contribute to that on our 3-acre site. Somebody's getting a telephone call. So what are the conditions affecting our ability to develop this vacant parcel that has been remained vacant for many, many years? Meadows is a new area within Oakmont. The site has been rough graded. You've probably seen the graders out there. Stonebridge Road is nearly completed. The oak tree preservation has happened across the site, and landscape setbacks will be provided along property boundaries, and we will provide a landscape interface with the detention basin, which is being built now. So what do we hope to be benefits that you would see coming to Oakmont? That we would increase the senior living opportunities within your community, offering another option for those who may need assistance or who may need memory care. We believe that addresses a noted community need, and we're believing that our development will enhance the recreational character that's already been established in such a quality way in your community. And then we also believe that we can increase the walkability by the trails that we're proposing to add to the active lifestyle of Oakmont. And as we complete our presentation, we are obviously going to be very open to answering questions. We also will be beginning our process through the city. We're in due diligence at the moment. So we are under contract to buy the property. We're hoping that our due diligence will indicate that we can proceed and that there are no roadblocks that we hadn't anticipated. And we're working very closely with the seller of the property. And we would conclude with our request that we can do what it takes to get the support of the Oakmont Village Board so that we can take that kind of support with us as we proceed to the entitlement processing at the city of Santa Rosa. So let us know what we need to do to make that possible. And once again, Tony and Bo and I are all here to answer questions, Mr. Chairman, as you would like to direct them to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carol. I'm sure it's most helpful. It's helpful to have you all here, and we appreciate the detail of your explanation. Visuals always help us a lot. But I'd like to defer to the audience for any kind of questions that they might want to have before I bring it back to the board. Please, Herm.
What is your timeline for the whole process?
It's a good question. What is the timeline for the process? And I wish we knew. What happens when you go through a city process, there are multiple reviews. And we have had preliminary discussions at the city, but there are multiple steps in it. So we would hope that we could go through the process and be under construction the end of 2015, summer 2015. So hopefully we can get through all of this in a year and bring this new amenity to the community in about a year from now. So that the occupancy and opening would be about April 2016. April 2016.
Back row. I can't see who's raising a hand. Please.
Hi, I have two questions. I think that's a wonderful idea, but my two questions are, number one, I would like to see what it's going to look like from Oakmont Drive. You really didn't address where, the main entrance to our community is. And number two is, how many employees would you have for, the occupants there? How many at any given time is it?
The question has to do with what is it going to look like from Oakmont, and we will be very happy to provide images of that elevation. Because we're in the conceptual stage, those are not ready yet. However, we recognize the importance of the Oakmont interface. Now, the good news is we're going to be about 65 to 70 feet away from Oakmont, but that doesn't mean we'll turn our back on the community. Quite the contrary. There will be good articulation of the architecture along that elevation, and we'll get images to you for future discussions. With regard to the number of employees, we expect 30 employees. And that number is over a 24-hour shift, of course, because we will be staffing it on a 24-hour basis.
That seems very minimal. And what I'm mainly concerned about is the parking for those employees. Because I've had relatives in those types of facilities, and there's a lot more than 30 employees. I mean, you're talking about cooks and
Your concern is noted, and we will make a note of that.
Because I saw 35, I was trying to count about 35 parking places, and I know that already the employee parking for the gardens overflows into the central activity area. There are a lot of parking places taken up there by those employees, and so I am concerned that having this new facility might, cause more of that to happen.
Okay, the concern is about parking overflow. We'll make good note of that. And one of the things that we don't want to have happen is a parking problem either. We do note, however, that in memory care, they won't be driving. And most of the residents that will need assisted living won't be driving either. So we would be really talking about visitors and guests. We will address your concern and we'll get back to you as we go through the city and confirm both their requirements and our assessment of the needs and keep you posted. Is that good?
Very good.
Thank you.
May I go back to the first part of her question, please, Carol? A detention basin is a new feature as far as developments here in Oakmont is concerned. And right now we're looking at a muddy ditch, I guess is how we would refer to it. So I think the interest of the residents in the perspective from Oakmont Drive may deal with both your construction and how that detention basin is going to look long-term.
Sure. And I agree with that because we're concerned also. We want the interface to be an attractive entrance to our community as well. And so we'll be working with the master developer on how a detention basin, which really has to just be available to carry water and allows it to soak into the ground before it is distributed out to the drainage system in the community. And that allows for some grass type of vegetation that has to be mowed and maintained from both a weed standpoint, but also we want an interface around the edge that's going to be attractive both for you and for our new residents.
Another question? George?
Okay. I was looking for the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because we're supposed to have mics out here.
I'll repeat your question.
Will you be handling level 3 assisted living?
No, we will not. It'll be assisted living and then memory care. So we would be going directly from having assisted, operate as an assisted, and then memory care as memory care.
No, my question was a little more complex. I'm familiar with 3 levels of assisted living, okay, depending on the requirements of the individual.
So you're really talking about skilled nursing?
What level of assisted, no, not quite. Okay, but you get to the point where somebody may need help getting dressed in the morning and maybe help with somebody taking them down to a dining room as 2 examples of higher level assisted living.
Yes, that level will be provided. Yes.
Harriet?
Will this be like the gardens, month-to-month rental, or will there be a buy-in program?
No, this is month-to-month rental.
Is there any talk of putting in daycare?
The question of daycare has been raised, and we're willing to look at that and determine how it might be able to be accommodated, because we do understand that there's interest in the community for daycare for respite purposes, and yes, we're going to take a look at that.
The comments on daycare that have come to some of us on the board, Carol, have to do with a cooperative arrangement with the Council on Aging, so that they might provide the service if you provided the space. And I think it's kind of the avenue that you might want to look into.
Okay, we will look into that and be in touch with them.
Other questions?
I would like to just iterate with John Taylor as the needing of a space for a senior daycare center, and Council on Aging is working with us, and all we're asking of this wonderful group of people that are coming in and presenting this space is that we just need a room that doesn't need a stove, just needs a sink and ADA bathroom, so that we can have this kind of a social daycare center. We already, one step up is that I've also am on board with a caregiver support group that's going to be starting up at Oakmont. That's very needed, and that would go along very well with having a space with Council on Aging coming in to have a senior social daycare center. It's a part of our community. This is who we are, and we need to address this. And this is a very positive thing to show on a brochure when people are looking for a place to stay. Is this is available? This is why you want to live here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the sincerity of your comments and our understanding even in greater detail the need, and we will look into it very seriously. Thank you.
I think as you look into it, Carol, you'll find that Oakmont has had really a very long beneficial relationship with the Council on Aging, particularly through the Meals on Wheels program. Last year, as an example, Oakmont residents serving as volunteer drivers for the delivery of the meals delivered over 5,000 meals to Oakmont residents in the course of the year. So tying in with that from a daycare point of view could be very helpful.
When my daughter was in Charity League, one of the charities that we supported was Meals on Wheels, and we would go and pick up the meals and deliver and visit with the recipients, and I understand the importance of that program as well. So thanks for the tip on who to be in touch with, and maybe you could even give us a list of those in your community that are working on that subject.
Any other questions? Wally?
You will own the retention basin or the property itself?
Yes, we will. Good question, by the way, because I think what you're asking is, are we going to be responsible and therefore, want to maintain it in a way that is conducive to the development of our property? And that's exactly the case. Thank you.
I have a suggestion for the Oaks at Stone. In Oakmont itself, in the last couple of weeks, there have been a lot of discussions. And one topic was signage. And my suggestion is that you all should be in contact with the architectural committee here, because signage in color and style should be in sync with everything for the development, and not a patchwork for you and a patchwork here and a patchwork there. And to be a little classy, to tie everything in all of Oakmont as far as signage is future.
Signage, and I agree with you, we want to be classy. And you can see from this kind of architecture that we're probably not going to put a white board out there.
I'm not suggesting you were. I'm saying we all should be in concert with each other to look like a community and not a separate housing and a separate this and a separate that.
Well, I don't know if we can address that, but we will do our best to provide signage consistent with sort of an Oakmont look.
Thank you all in the audience. I know the board has not had a chance to raise in. Are there directors that have questions for Carol? John?
Carol, with regard to possible impact on Oakmont's recreational facilities, those folks that will be residents in your facility that are ambulatory, how many of them might be wanting to use, say, for example, the Oakmont swimming pool? Obviously, you'd mentioned you're going to have an in-house exercise section, but can you comment on that?
Yes, we would not anticipate that we would actually become a member of the association at this point, because we don't believe that the residents that we would be marketing to would need those facilities and therefore would not be a drain on your existing resources.
For clarification, some of you may not be aware that when negotiations were first held with Mr. Carinali regarding development of this property, the agreement that has been reported actually does what you have just described. As I'm sure you know, that residents of your facility would not be members of the Oakmont Village Association.
But on the other hand, the residents of the homes that he's built will be members, and they will be paying the fee for those amenities, yes.
Any other questions? Herm?
Yes. I am particularly pleased to see what you presented today. Scott and I first talked about the memory care units back last November, I think. And I am really pleased to see you advance to this point. My question really has to do with, do you have plans for keeping the board and the community apprised of the development of your plans as they do progress and or do not progress?
I know that do not progress is always an issue in any community. Hopefully we have no recessions approaching us, and we have every confidence that we're going to be able to complete our due diligence and proceed to development. But yes, We appreciate the opportunity to communicate with you. I've already spoken to your representative, Mr. Haggerty. Where are you? Yes, who wants to not only report in the news, but we will be willing to give periodic updates to your board, both in writing and in person if requested. And Herm, we very much expect to continue our outreach. For example, one of the things that the city wants us to do, in addition to presentation to your board and the community that's gathered here today, is to have a noticed community-wide meeting that will be conducted by the city and that everyone will receive notices of, and that they will lead the meeting. We will come in and do a presentation. And that will be at a little later step, a little later in the process, so that we would have more detailed, fully dimensioned, exacting number of parking spaces and those sort of things, so that we could refine the plan and the program and be able to communicate back with your board on a frequent basis.
And where do you plan to have those meetings?
We expect to have them somewhere here in Oakmont to make it convenient for you, if you'll permit us to do so.
We certainly will.
It won't make you go downtown to the meeting.
The city, Herm, has usually been very happy to have us sponsor their meeting in the Berger Auditorium. Alan?
I want to make sure I'm clear on this.
Mike?
Your mic, Alan.
If I can remember the mic, I want to make sure I'm clear on this. I understand that the people in the memory care will not be residents or members of Oakmont. The people in assisted living will also not be members of Oakmont?
That's our plan at this time, yes.
Other questions from the board? Al?
Is there an overall budget for your project? What is it going to cost you?
We don't have that established at this time. The question was there an overall budget for the project, and we don't have that at this time.
Carol, aside from the city asking to have this meeting at which residents would be clearly invited and you would make your presentation, is there any other avenue of support that you would be looking to the association to provide?
Well, we would love a letter from your board indicating the fact that you've reviewed it and that you're in support of the concepts. And then as we go back through the process, there may be another stage at which you could issue an additional letter. As we go into hearings, the hearings at the city will be a hearing before either a zoning administrator or the planning commissioner, public hearings. Then there will be hearings in front of the design review board. And so there will be multiple opportunities for public input, but we intend to make it as convenient as possible working with you to hold these community meetings at your request.
Our workshop sessions are not for any official action, but I wonder if it would be appropriate, Cassie, for you to work with Carol during the next 2 weeks so that at our official board meeting on the 17th, we could consider approving a conceptual letter supportive of the concept. Any objection from the board? Thank you.
That sounds very good. Well, if you have no more questions, I know you have other things on the agenda today, so we would thank you for your time, and we will look forward to working with you to bring this community to Oakmont Village. Thank you for your attention.
I appreciate Herm Hess's comments about his having interacted with Scott Bissey since Scott came on the job as the general manager for Oakmont Gardens. But I think many of us in Oakmont will remember that the concept of having some kind of expansion of the Oakmont Gardens into an assisted living and memory care facility goes back well into the late years of the 1990s when a fellow by the name of Bob Rogers, who happened to be president of the board, and tied in with his medical experience. And so to have something like this come forth at this time with the possibility of fruition in not too many additional years is certainly heartening from that point of view.
One last point, I just want to reiterate again, there's cookies and water and iced tea in the back, and it was provided for us today by Oakmont Gardens, so please avail yourselves of them, and we'll be back again soon. Thanks so much.
All right, the next item on our agenda is the subject of emergency preparedness here in the community, and it involves both the goals of the Oakmont Emergency Preparedness Committee as well as some funding that they need in order to make sure that we're properly equipped to combine the volunteer talents of residents with meeting the emergency situation. And Pat Barkley is going to take us through the ropes as far as that presentation is concerned. Pat, thank you for coming.
Hey, John, and thank you for you and the board for giving us the opportunity to talk. The main reason for coming to you, John had mentioned funding, but we're also going to need some board involvement as we go forward. And as Mike gets my slides up here, I'll have to admit right off the bat, I have no photographs, so you're not going to see any visuals, and I'll apologize in advance. It won't be nearly as entertaining as the last presentation. I also have to say that probably about a little over an hour ago, I was still on the freeway driving back from the other side of the Sierras, so my mind may not completely be in gear just yet. I may need the memory unit. But if you just bear with me, and then the last bear with me is I've been suffering some back problems, so if I wind up disappearing into the chair, it's nothing other than spasms. I know. What do they say? Growing old is not for the faint of heart, right? How are we doing, Mike? Okay, well, I can start off. We have established several goals for 2014, one of which was to increase our visibility to the community. So you're probably going to see, or have seen, more and more in the Oakmont News, for example, and in the Kenwood Press, and at other functions, to kind of get the word out about who we are. One of the reasons I got involved, joined Al Thomas in January as co-chair of the committee. It surprised me when talking with residents how few people knew what the Oakmont Emergency Preparedness Committee was and what it did. The term was foreign. So that's one of our goals, is to get the message out and get it out hopefully stronger than we have. Our mission is fairly simple, and that's to help Oakmont prepare, respond, and recover in the event of an emergency or disaster. And it's been that mission for about 31 years. Hard to believe that it's gone on that long. I haven't been a member all that time. But we do currently have over 300 resident volunteers participating. And I've listed the committee members. You've seen these, the board has seen these. This was presented when we established the committee. Excuse me. I knew that was going to happen. I am happy to report that we have two positions. One was unfilled when we filed for the committee recommendation, and that was the logistics director. And hopefully within the next few weeks we will have a logistics director. Jim Wimbett has volunteered, and once he's approved by the committee, we will submit his name to the board for approval. I also have a candidate for the Emergency Facilities Director, position that I am currently acting in, and I won't mention any names in case he says no. There's always a danger. Thanks, Mike. So who are we? At the lowest level in emergency preparedness, or what we refer to as the Emergency Response Team. You may have heard the terms OEPC and COPE. There's a larger umbrella, and that is the Oakmont Emergency Response Team. It encompasses everyone involved and emergency preparedness and response in Oakmont. At the lowest level is neighbors helping neighbors. I think hopefully the majority of people here are familiar with COPE, Citizens Organized to Prepare for Emergencies, where we actually have neighborhoods organized, a leader in the neighborhood who will look out for the welfare of the individuals in that area, and if someone needs help, either arrange for the help by the neighbors or seek outside assistance. And seeking outside assistance is actually going to be moving down to communications, but one of the areas we provide assistance is the emergency centers. This East Rec Center, exactly where you're sitting right now, gets turned into an emergency center in the event of a disaster. The same is true at the Burger, and the same is true at the West. We're going to actually be conducting a drill here on October 18th involving all three areas. Obviously, the West, we're probably going to be outside, since I understand work's going to be inside. But the services provided are medical, counseling, we have some logistics support, and we have clerical support. So these are all volunteers, and we get every center activated in the event of an emergency. Also, for example, if I give you an example, someone in the neighborhood has been injured, the neighborhood can't take care of it. If you can get them to an emergency center, there's minor first aid available, staffed by medical professionals, typically retired, but trained. Now, we also have what we call zone communicators. And zone communicators are actually individuals with walkie-talkies that wander the neighborhoods and are in communications with people at the emergency centers. Excuse me. So in the emergency centers, in addition to someone who's talking to these people wandering the neighborhoods with the walkie-talkies, we have amateur radio operators that are communicating to the outside world, outside of Oakmont. That would be the Santa Rosa Emergency Operations Center over the Amateur Radio Emergency Services Network. And that includes city and county services. So if you're in Oakmont and you're in an area that's covered by, for example, a COPE team or a zone communicator, we have the ability to help you here or request EMS, fire, police assistance from the city or the county to get them here. So it's a complete loop. And the main reason we're using radio communications is if you've ever been in a major event, and this is fortuitous because Napa just went through it, and I assume if you're like me, we all went through a little shaking here as well. There were areas without power for an extended period of time, and without any communication services, including landlines. We don't rely on any of that. We have generator emergency power, we've got batteries, we use radio communications. So we don't have to worry about the infrastructure that may be affected by a major event. We also have trained safety and security personnel that will get activated, and they will actually monitor what's going on, especially on the streets and inside Oakmont, at the entrances, for example, just to protect lives and property in the event that we become a target. Because we are a 55 and older community, there's potential that we could become a target in a major event. And so we have some trained, typically retired police and other retired services that will be keeping an eye out for our welfare. So that's basically what we do. Moving right along, Mike. So we do have a unique challenge. There are a number of age-restricted communities that have emergency response plans, and we're in the process of developing one here for Oakmont as well. Their emergency response plans are a little easier to develop because most of the functions are provided by paid personnel. if you go to Spring Valley, or you go to Verena, or you go to one of the other retirement communities, and you take a look at their planning, paid staff fills the majority of the function. We don't have that luxury here. This is all volunteer activities. And the challenge we have now with volunteers is, this has been going on for 31 years, and what happens in many committees, as our residents age, they tend to withdraw from the activity, and we're finding a difficult time getting additional volunteers to replace them. That continues to be one of our largest challenges. But since we do rely on volunteers, and a limited number of volunteers, there are a few things that's imperative for us to do. One is to make the volunteer's job as easy as possible. And when I say easy as possible, it means if you're trained on a particular item, then that is the same item that's in use, for example, at every emergency center. You don't have to relearn anything when you move from place to place to place. That's not the way it exists today. Right now we have differing types of equipment at each of our emergency centers. So from a logistics standpoint, if I want to dispatch a volunteer, because I have an oversupply of volunteers at the east, and send them to the west, I run the risk that it's going to take them time now to figure out what is this new equipment looking like, how does their layout work, what are their recording processes. So one of our huge goals is to get some common disciplines in place and make all of our equipment common, so that the volunteers can feel comfortable regardless of where they are and what they're doing to support us. Now, the funding issue. In the past, the OEPC was funded through the sale of gas rentals. And I've heard that they made quite a profit on the markup of the gas wrenches. And it was very successful up until PG&E decided that's not an action that you should take. So they kind of reversed their stance on first thing that you want to do in a disaster is cut the power and turn off the gas. Now they're saying, don't cut the power, don't turn off the gas unless you know for dead certain there's a problem. So our gas wrenches became less of an attractive item to sell, and so now we're looking for support from the OVA for funding for the goals that we want to accomplish over the next couple of years. And speaking of the goals, so this is 2014 and 2015 inclusive, and I'll separate them out shortly, quickly, because I don't want to bore you too much. So one of the things we did early this year is adopt something called FEMA's Incident Command Structure. It is used by every emergency organization that operates at the city and county level. And if you don't follow that structure, it makes it difficult to be able to communicate with the other individuals that are on the outside. So we're working on that. There's online training we're encouraging our volunteers to take. Gives you the terminology, shows you how to structure, and it was the adoption of this incident command structure that actually fomented the reconstruction, I should say the reorganization of the OEPC committee itself. It is now organized along the lines of what FEMA recommends. Now, in terms of goals, I mentioned it, the adequacy and commonality of the equipment and supplies at all the emergency centers to make the volunteers' jobs easier. Now, we need to improve our emergency power capabilities, and I'm going to get to that when I go through the detail at the emergency center level. Upgrading communications capabilities. We have a lot of experience over the last 2 years with communications inside of Oakmont. Some of it good, some of it not so good. And so now we're trying to address the not so good pieces of it to bring us up to making sure that it is reliable and it's effective. And that goes in hand with adopting a common model or a radio to use. Right now, you'd be surprised that the majority, if not all, of the amateur radio operators supporting emergency preparedness in Oakmont are using radios that they purchased. It's their own personal property. And it's very difficult to find two models that are the same between the people that are buying them. Someone's going to go for the $300 version, someone else is going to go for the $65 version. Having inconsistent models creates a challenge from a communications perspective. And we're going to get into that again a little bit when we talk about communications and money. We also would like to provide formal training. My dream, that may or may not come to fruition if I don't live long enough, is to have someone formally trained in first aid in every neighborhood in Oakmont. So that if a disaster hit, and again, this goes back into the COPE concept of neighbors helping neighbors, if we have an individual who, at least one, formally trained in first aid, the action is going to be in the neighborhoods. If neighborhoods can take care of themselves, it lessens the burden on the rest of the emergency services organization. I would also like to get a collection of people that are trained in something called Civil Emergency Response Training, or CERT. It's one step below a professional first responder. And it is typically offered by counties and cities. Unfortunately, we have a challenge here, Santa Rosa and Sonoma. It is not a very active program, and it's predominantly, I think, because of funding and possibly access to people. But there are other ways where we can get that training accomplished. And we definitely want to get formalized procedures, preparation and response materials out to the residents. It's probably the most common complaint we've had. We had a very nice presentation in May where we talked about what it takes to be personally prepared. And it was very well attended. It's one of the better attended sessions we've had. We probably had close to 110, maybe 120 people. And we probably had an equal number of requests after that meeting for copies of the handouts. So one of the things we would like to do is to get an insert in the Oakmont News so that all residents have the benefit of this information. And there's other things that we would like to do along similar lines. Now, when the board gets involved, we need to establish memorandums of understanding. We have some that exist now, but they're not enforceable because they were created through the Emergency Preparedness Committee, not through the OVA. So I don't think, pull it into a court of law, that probably would not stand up to scrutiny. So we actually need to get those memorandums of understandings. And this is with the Oakmont Golf Course, where they have actually agreed to allow us to, in the event of an emergency, use their golf carts, have access to the quail, use their storage facilities. Same goes with the Oakmont Market for food and supplies. Now there is potentially liability to the board when that happens. So if a disaster hits, and we do need to exercise those memorandums of understanding, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, we now have to go right into the Quail Inn. There's going to be some costs associated with that would have to be borne by the OVA. So, but these are the discussions we're going to need to have. The committee cannot be the one to establish the MOU. It has to come from the OVA. Okay, thanks, Mike. So what we're looking for in terms of the goals and funding needs for the emergency centers. When I first joined the OAPC, I couldn't believe we actually had canvas litters. 2 people canvas litters. You got one person, and everyone's seen them, right? You land a canvas litter, one person's on one end, one person's on the other, and then you just carry this person. It was hard for me to envision here in Oakmont anyone using a canvas litter, especially if they were going to be trying to carry me, for example. Not going to. So what we'd like to do is replace all of the canvas litters in the emergency centers with wheelchairs. which to me makes a lot more sense. And this would be for movement of someone, for example, who's been injured, they show up in a car, they're out in the parking lot, we need to get them into the emergency center. Ambulance lit or no. Also, there's no guarantee that when an emergency hits, that it's going to be a beautiful, bright, shiny day like it is right now. We do occasionally, every once in a while, get a little rain. And it does get cold, especially in the winter. So if you have an event where, for example, an emergency center, because of the disaster, or like an earthquake, can't be occupied, or we have an overflow from the number of people that we're dealing with, we need some type of temporary shelter where we can triage, and perform first aid for people in a protected environment. We also have, when I was talking about emergency power, we have a generator burger that I think you can hear at the East Rec Center. It's so loud. It was a donation from the Kiwanis, is that correct? So their heart was in the right place. It was just really not the right device. So we would like to replace that. They're relatively inexpensive items, $900, and very efficient in terms of the use of gas. We also discovered in conducting drills that we use emergency power to power the communications equipment. Discovered that isn't necessarily where you're going to be setting up your areas for triage and taking care of people. So what we're looking for is an additional generator, one to power communications equipment and possibly to be used for recharging batteries, and the other generator for lights and for other emergency type equipment where it would actually be needed, as opposed to running 150 or 200 foot long tripping hazards and potentially not having the power that we would need. So that's the second generator of each of these. Obviously, we're going to need spare gas, places to store the gas, and ultimately siphons. Unlike our drills, which run for 4 hours, events like we've seen in Napa can run 3 to 7 days. We tend to forget that, especially when you look at staffing arrangements for centers. You can't actually ask a volunteer to sit at a station and operate for 24 hours. They may have 12-hour shifts, which is one reason why one of the things we're pushing for is for food and water for these first responders. And these are our first responders that are coming into the emergency centers. They're going to be sitting here for potentially 12 plus hours handling an event. And so what we want is MRE type meals, some to sustain them and making sure they have enough food and water to keep going. And then we have the typical medical items, triage and induction tags, and this is elements that all emergency services use. We're tracking people as they come through the system, fire extinguishers, portable lights, and I've guesstimated the recurring cost, and the recurring cost it's kind of an annual budget that's going to fluctuate. A large portion of it is going to be recurring first aid training and additional radios as we get additional volunteers. On the communications that I touched on, right now we have temporary antennas that get erected whenever we go through a simulated emergency. The communications capability of these antennas is not necessarily the best. It is also time consuming getting them set up. It makes more sense to me and to the committee that we put fixed antennas at each of the facilities supporting both the zone communication, these little walkie-talkies, and the ham radio operator. At the fixed facility, there is no setup time, and there is actually a greater efficiency from the antenna. We also want to pick up 20 ham radio transceivers. This is actually to replace the communications equipment that the amateurs are currently using so that we have a common model and something that does exactly the same thing. I can exchange it between hams and we can program them the same. So that, again, we get back to this commonality and consistency. Now we want to pick up additional walkie-talkies for the communications in the neighborhoods. One of the big thrusts that we've had this year, and it'll be even bigger push, is we really have fairly limited coverage in Oakmont right now for this walkie-talkie, what we call the zone communications, getting the neighborhoods to be able to communicate back to the emergency centers. We need so many more volunteers. I don't know, our level of coverage in Oakmont now is probably less than what, 25%, Tony? Around 25? So we have a long way to go. And so if you know anyone, the only qualifications are to be able to walk and to talk and push a button. So if you can walk and you can talk and you can push a button, you can be a zone communicator. I don't understand why everyone doesn't volunteer. But we've had a difficult time recruiting people for that function. So 25% in the event of an emergency, obviously, is not a very good number. And obviously, the people that are dedicated, and these are very dedicated people that want to see this work, they will extend the areas that they're assigned to just to make sure that there is coverage, even though there may not be a zone communicator in that area, which is putting an additional burden on them. I'll stop the sales pitch for the moment. We also want to pick up, right now again, we're using privately owned equipment as the central base stations in each of the facilities and in our Oakmont Emergency Center and in the radio that communicates with the outside world. These are all privately owned, and they tend to be also different models. And so for the same reason, we want to purchase the same model so that we have commonality of equipment, and it's not just common, but it can also be swapped in the event of a failure. And lastly, training and publications. I talked about the CERT training. It is possible that if we can find a source for that training, that we may be able to get it covered under a FEMA grant. This is something that FEMA does look kindly on. Same could be true of city and county. The city and county, though, are much more difficult nuts to crack. As undoubtedly everyone's heard, they're always crying poor. And right now they don't have an active CERT program. And then we would like to have a couple of Oakmont News inserts that people could actually take out, post, use, and we can actually reach all of the residents instead of just the ones that attend our meetings. So in summary, if you total up all of the numbers that you saw in the preceding slides, we're looking at around $8,700 in purchases for the emergency centers, which would bring us up to where I believe and the committee believes we need to be functional. $8,200 for communications, roughly $1,400 for training and publication. And then an estimated recurring cost of around $4,600. That's not a fixed number. And last but not least, next year went away. Goals for next year in 2015, because we're not done. Emergency preparedness in Oakmont is ongoing. This is a work in process. Well, one of the things we're looking at is establishing a calling tree service that's offered by several web-based companies where we can activate our emergency team through a single phone call to a service, and that service then contacts all the other emergency personnel. As you can imagine, if we have 300 plus people, that notifying everybody of what's needed, where they're needed, if it's outside of what they normally do, could be a little challenging. We're also looking to produce, I don't know if anyone saw that may have attended a meeting, Marin has an outstanding document called Get Ready Marin. It's made available to all of their residents. It is just a fantastic planning, preparation, and response document directed towards the individual. we would like to create something along those lines unique. Wilkmont, and Marin has no problems with us plagiarizing any element. We talked about establishing memorandums of understanding, and we would like to start Red Cross first aid training. I got a quote from them of $56 per attendee in quantity. And last but not least, if we can find a volunteer, we would like to have a website so that we too could have an internet presence. And with that, I will entertain questions from anyone. Yes?
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Back to you, John.
Are there questions from the audience? Please. I'm sorry I don't know your name.
Linda, but I noticed that you're losing money off those gas wrenches. But this last earthquake made me very aware of going online to buy, I admit I don't have one of those radios that you can plug in, you know, a cell phone, you crank it, whatever.
Yep.
Between that and a basic go bag, if they were bought in quantity at a wholesale price, it would be advantageous twofold. One is the community would make money to fund some of these programs, and we would have more people ready for emergencies.
With the same type of equipment.
Yeah, well, the challenge on the go bags is if you go out, there's as many vendors
Right.
there as you can possibly imagine. And what is in the actual go bags varies from vendor to vendor to vendor. I think it would be difficult for any of us to dictate what any one of us should have in the go bag. Now, we might
But it would be voluntary, you know.
I don't think there would be any objection to saying, hey, here are what we believe are 3 or 4 categories of bags, and then take orders to see if we can get a quantity discount.
Right, and then you might save money that way, and you'd have residents who were more prepared.
Yep, that's a possibility. It's worth looking at.
We were thinking more of a wholesale purchase of radios and sell them
Crank
to
radios.
the crank
Crank
radios,
radios.
where you can get it at a super price and resell it with something added on as a fundraiser to Oakmont residents, and they'd all have the same kind of radio.
You would be surprised, we actually had a similar discussion to that. The number of residents that currently own crank radios is probably much higher than you realize. Yeah, I think at one meeting I even did a resident meeting saying how many people got one of these things. And there were an awful lot of hands went up. So I'm not sure how large a market that would be. I think the other issue with it would be great as a promotion and make some money off of it, but they're relatively inexpensive, and anyone with an internet connection is probably not going to be willing to pay $40 for a radio they can get for $20. That would be a concern on my part.
I think the board would be interested if any of you have comments or thoughts about the kind of transition that the Emergency Preparedness Committee is proposing. What they are in essence saying is they believe the time has come that the OVA ought to be funding the equipment and supplies that volunteers use, as opposed to the past under which the volunteer not only provided their time and energy, but also provided the equipment and supplies. And so what the board is dealing with, as you and will be trying to address at a future meeting, is the question of funding that Pat's presentation has so clearly presented. Are there any thoughts or comments on that specifically? Any questions or comments from the board? Oh, excuse me, Cassie.
One from the manager. Has there ever been any research done, or has an attorney ever been asked about, or the insurance company that covers Oakmont, has there been any inquiries about how far our insurance covers a committee like this? Because again, I always keep going back to the fact that we're a recreational association, and we're not a master association for all of these other associations. So I have a little bit of a concern in the back of my head that could be an insurance issue over this, or there could be some liability about OVA taking this on.
I just wanted to echo Cassie's concerns. It's insurance issues also, but also whether it fits within our basic article. We're a recreational association. I just looked at them, and it does provide that OVA has all general powers authorized under law for nonprofits, but I think we need a legal opinion, because taking care of homeowners in their homes is outside the evidence scope of articles.
Thank you. John?
Yes, with regard to most of where the liability would come would be working, handling injured residents and first aid, those kinds of things. It's clearly covered by the state of California under specific area for Good Samaritan laws. It's been tested, proven in court over and over again. So from that point of view, there really is not an issue.
Yes, sir.
Pat, are you working with the Finance Committee in regard to determining what are the things that you'd like to have first? What are your highest priorities? And can they be funded with our present available funds? Second question I have is, have you
How about
learned
letting him answer
anything,
the
or are
first?
you working with the people in Napa as a result of the recent earthquake on lessons learned of emergency preparedness?
Answer to the first question, we were not even considering going to the Finance Committee until we had an opportunity to present our thoughts here, figuring if there was not going to be any board support for what we're proposing, it was a pointless exercise to put anything together for the Finance Committee. On the second, it is on a to-do list, but right now, Napa is nowhere close to being ready to talk to anybody. They have got months of recovery left, and at the end, they're going to be going through their own lessons learned, and there is actually a tri-county, it's Marin, Sonoma, Napa, and possibly Solano, there may be 4 counties, that actually meet on a regular basis that talk emergency issues, and that would undoubtedly be a subject that would be brought up, lessons learned from Napa. But we pull also lessons learned which are immediately available from any number. I've been through 4 major quakes and have looked at all of the lessons learned that came out of there as well. And code actually was one of the lessons learned that came out of Loma Prieta and was started by the San Francisco Fire Department. So the answer is yes.
Cassie, in response to your comments, let's put that on our Thursday agenda to look at what kind of questions we can most effectively ask regarding liability, as well as authority to act in this area with association funds. Because I think in addition to the thorough work that the committee has done, we need to be sure we're on the right track in proceeding in some way. And then we can bring that recommendation to the board at our September 17th. Any other director comments? John?
Yeah, going back to Herm Hesse's part 2 question, I don't see a strong need to check with Napa. There are things that come out of that, but there have been no shortage of emergencies, much larger than that, where lessons have been learned, and there's no shortage of information available and recommendations. So it's not something we'd have to wait for them to come up with a critique of how things went there. There's plenty out there. Just for your edification, I've been a radio ham for 55 years. I've been working in emergency communications for many years. I was a firefighter and an EMT. Incidentally, Mark was also back here. And I am liaison to the board from this thing. So I think we are in a position to work very well together to come up with a good solution.
And if I could just add, as Mike pointed out, the lessons learned through all of the disasters through the U.S., gave birth to FEMA's National Incident Management System and their incident command structure, the structure that we're trying to emulate here in Oakland.
Yeah, I've been to the ICS training too.
Yeah.
Yes,
The cost that Pat's asking for is like $18,000, most of which would be paid out of the CIF, which has $1.3 million cash available. So yes, I think we might have the fund for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess this is where I should say it does not include tax and shipping.
Excuse me, one last in the audience.
I have a question. COPE falls under your purview, right?
That is correct.
Now, we had this big earthquake hit here last week. Was anything supposed to be done, or just be glad that nothing happened?
It's, well...
When it struck, in other words, what...
Right, it's a question of the notification issues. So in this case, the notification starts at the top and goes down. And so as the chair of the committee, co-chair with Al, the first thing I did at 3:20 in the morning when I got thrown out of bed was to immediately check both the USGS website to see where the clerk was centered and what their shake map looked like, and to check to see whether or not these Santa Rosa emergency services networks were activated. So either one of those that would indicate there would be an issue here would have caused us to initiate our emergency response.
Yeah, I'm a COPE volunteer for my neighborhood.
Fantastic.
And in the morning, at daylight, I walked around to see, houses were fine and no problem. But I didn't know whether to knock on doors at 3:20 in the morning or anything else. I had no personal instruction of what to do. So I was lost. It was my first experience here.
Yeah, well, and that's actually, if you notice, one of our goals for 2015 is this calling tree, automated calling tree, and that would play into it. So that if COPE did need to be activated, we would use the calling tree, and then all the COPE leaders, including yourself, would be getting a phone.
Thank you. Sue?
I'm sure you've considered Facebook or a Twitter feed or something like that to get instant communication. I mean, I posted on our Oakmont Buzz, but that was the day after the earthquake, just to see if anyone reported anything, any damage or falling objects getting hurt. And aside from a piece of art glass in somebody's house, there was no report of damage. And so I thought that was fairly effective, although it doesn't cover 3,000 homes.
Right, and if you look at the percentage of the Facebook and Twitter users in Oakmont, it is actually a relatively low percentage.
Another thought on that. The other problem with social networking is it requires the internet with power, and I guarantee you Napa did not have that immediate aftermath.
Are there any other pressing points, because we need to move on with our agenda? I saw one hand go up. Is that?
Just in closing, I thought I'd mention that people here might be interested in knowing that the COPE structure in Oakmont has been used by the city of Santa Rosa as a model, and we've been instructing them on how to organize their COPE infrastructure.
Good point.
Thank you. Thank you again, Pat.
Thank you again. Thanks for putting up with me.
The next item on the board's agenda for the workshop discussion has to do with home exchanges and short-term property rentals. By way of background, some of you may be aware that realtors in Oakmont are actually promoting rental programs for properties, and we have reason to believe from personal observations by residents that those are both shorter than 30 days, which is the minimum required under our CC&Rs, and that they also result in underage rentals. And so this issue is up for discussion from that point of view. Secondly, we have had one recent case in which a resident, for a period of less than 2 weeks, engaged in a home exchange with a European family to come and stay in their home in Oakmont. A case in which both the adults were underage and the rental involved children. And we have had expressions of interest by other residents in, on their part, being willing to vigorously pursue as a property right in their mind the home exchange program as a wonderful educational opportunity. Cassie, do you want to elaborate further on this situation? As soon as the sound effects go off in the background. Thank you.
Since the short-term rentals have come to our attention, Kathy Doherty has been searching the short-term rental websites to see which of the owners here have been renting on a short-term basis. And we have caught 2 homeowners from that site and have advised them that they can no longer do this. I think it's getting out into the realty community now that we're starting to aggressively look at short-term rentals and how to take action on them. The other part is Jackie. Jackie Reinhardt is here. She is the person who was doing the other type of rental, vacation rental, and home exchange. Sorry, home exchange. And so you might want to talk to her about it. You do have an opinion from the association attorney in your workshop book.
Jackie, do you have some comments you want to make?
Yes, I do.
You want to use a microphone so everybody can hear you?
Is it on?
Where's the question?
Okay, there we go. Okay, my name is Jackie Reinhardt, and my husband and I have done 8 home exchanges mostly prior to moving to Oakmont. And we've exchanged with expats in Mexico, with families from France, Ireland, and Denmark. We've had no complaints from neighbors or problems in our home. That's because we choose very carefully with whom we agree to do an exchange. We've even entrusted our dogs to our home exchangers. No money is exchanged. The major benefit is that both parties save on vacation expenses. Most exchanges are for less than 21 days. A home exchange, in my opinion, is more like having a house sitter than a short-term rental. The difference, of course, is that you pay a house sitter and you collect money from a rental. I understand the requirement that one should not exchange with a family who does not meet the age requirement. I looked at my CC&Rs and didn't see that, so I had already made arrangements. And Cassie
allowed me to make an exception when I found out. And the only reason I found this, that I went to get a swimming permit for the family that stayed in my house. But at any rate, so I can see the benefit of no home exchanges unless they meet the age requirement of 55 plus, and you might even want to prohibit the length of time. But it seems to me punitive to disallow a home exchange when there's no negative impact on the community.
I'd like to ask you a question. Since you say that you can understand the application of the CC&Rs as far as age, why is it that you don't understand the application of the CC&Rs as far as short-term is concerned? In other words, they're both in the same controlling documents of the association, both the age restriction and the short-term restriction.
Well, I don't know, the way I read them, that anyone of any age could stay in your house up to 90 days.
A guest could stay in your house up to 90 days because what I'm trying to get at is to understand your point of view, not argue with you about it. Understand your point of view when the CC&Rs seem to address the board on the basis of the property being for residential use only, occupancy by the owner.
But it's very similar to
days, and the 90-day provision, as we understand it, involves the length of time that a guest could be in the property that you are occupying.
I see, so you can't even have a home sitter.
I'm sorry?
You can't have a house sitter either?
I don't believe so. But
No dog sitters, no house sitters, nothing? Unless you're there? I'm confused.
that's one of the things we're trying to address. So I appreciate
I
that.
don't understand that. I mean, that means that I can't take a vacation because nobody can stay in my house and take care of my dogs. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm asking for your point of view as part of the discussion that we're having today.
Well,
understand the process.
My point
Because
of
I do
view-
know, as a matter of fact, that when my neighbor is gone, someone comes and checks on their pets during
Right.
the time that they
Yeah.
are there.
Well, and many people have house sitters. Yeah. Because otherwise you'd be chained to your house.
Thank you.
So I just don't, I guess I don't understand the negative impact on the community from doing this. That's what I'm having a hard time understanding.
Alan?
May I address? I think we're getting this confused. There's two separate issues, short-term rentals and home exchange, or other people occupying a place for a short period of time, where there's no, where they're within the boundaries of age restriction and that sort of thing in Oakmont. I personally am very much appalled at the idea of short-term rentals, and I've heard it's been abused enormously. Home exchange is a totally different thing. It's not an ongoing business. It is a personal expression. It would be like me having a guest come into my house and me taking off for a weekend, or me having somebody come and sit in my house and take care of my dog while I go away for a week. And a neighbor just did that. There's all kinds of issues with the home exchange that may or may not need to be addressed. The rental issue is clear. It's unequivocal in the bylaws. It's verboten for less than 30 days. The home exchange is not clear. I don't remember Malcolm's letter saying anything directly that is prohibited by the bylaws. In my reading of the bylaws, it says it's not. My 2 cents.
I'm going to agree with Alan on the exchange piece. My understanding of the bylaws, the protective restrictions, would be that the restrictions that are currently enforceable are age and temporary occupancy. And from what I can tell, the home exchange is qualified, it can be qualified to be residential use. If there's no dollar, or there are no dollars exchange, it's not commercial, it's not hotel, it's not transient occupancy. which is very different to me than rentals, whether it be short-term, long-term, or whatever. Rentals, it's basically the property is being used for possibly something other than residential. It could be a commercial venture or an investment venture as well. But exchanges, to me, if there's no dollars being used, there is a burden on the community. I don't believe there's no burden, because I heard Jackie say also that you went and got a swimming pass. So that means that there is some kind of burden on the community, because if it's a regular thing, there are people coming in the office and getting passes and whatnot. But as far as our CC&Rs are concerned, I don't see how exchanges could be actually in violation unless we get a legal opinion that they are.
Yes, sir.
There's a national organization called VRBO, which is an acronym for Vacation Rentals by Owner. Is this a proposal to bring that into Oakmont?
No. I use something called homeexchange.com, in which people show their houses, and you have your house listed, and you have ongoing communication with them. And the only thing you do when you're a member of homeexchange.com is that you pay to list your home as an annual, quote, membership fee. But that's the only money. It's a not-for-profit. No, it isn't. Never can be. No. There is no money exchange. I'm sure they make money off this membership fee.
John, this is the kind of dialogue I think should be begun, because Alan has pointed out, I think clearly that there's a difference. There's no money being passed back and forth, but our CC&Rs were written 40 or 50 years ago, and now we have things that have changed since then. And one of the things aiding is the website and websites and the internet that make what you're doing more possible. We got from our attorney perhaps a suggestion, not a recommendation, a suggestion for a de minimis approach to the exchange, aside from rentals and the guest policy and age restrictions. And this kind of dialogue that's been started today, I think, is exactly what should happen, but just continue and get deeper and parse out the fundamental differences of, and how, as you say, how it would be negatively affecting the neighborhood, the community, and how it would not. And what is it like, and what is it not like? And what do the CC&Rs and the bylaws say? And see what kind of flexibility we have as a board representing the community. I just think this is a great dialogue, should continue, and we should look at it very closely. And I can't believe we're the first community who've had this problem. There might be some information out there that we could that would help us and maybe shortcut some legal processes too, or payments.
I think Bob brings up a point that I hadn't thought of, Cassie. Have you checked with any of your compatriots on what's going on like this elsewhere?
Just writing them in now. It's never come up.
Thank you.
I'll find out.
Well, do we not allow house sitters?
Sorry, I didn't.
I was just curious. Do we not allow house sitters? I was just curious for my future reference.
I think the dialogue's just started. We don't know nothing. We don't know nothing at this point.
We do know, Jackie, that house sitters do exist. The question is,
Oakmonters come in and do house sitting. Yeah.
right. The question is that right as far as our community CC&Rs are concerned? We're not trying to say it's wrong. We're just, now that the issue gets raised, first brought about by the short-term rentals promoted by real estate interests, and then the home exchange comes up, and now you point out that we've got people sitting with people's pets, and we've got house sitters for safety reasons.
I'm in trouble, aren't I?
It's a whole spectrum of things that we haven't had to talk about before. And that's how workshops get started.
Well, one other point of view that I just want to add is, I obviously need a dog sitter whenever I go out of town. And the only option I have is a couple without children is to beg my sister to come
What
under
it
your
is,
current CCNRs if you don't approve house sitting, which is, you know, quite a handicap. I'm gonna have to invent some children.
Thank you for your thoughts. Any other input from, I see a hand back there against the bright window. That's all I can see against the light.
I'd like to go back and address the issue of short-term rentals. I have a thought, and I'll be available for the next board meeting. My name's Jody Darby. I live on Stonebridge. I've organized my thoughts, so please forgive me if I'm reading to you. I've often heard Oakmont referred to as a resort or a place with resort-style living, and while I love the amenities that cause people to think of it that way, I fear that some are coming to apply one aspect I'd rather not see here, the come-and-go aspect. And while I know the current percentage of short-term rentals is quite small, there is potential for proliferation if not checked quickly. Our local wine country is becoming more and more popular for getaways. And with Napa partially out of commission, I think Sonoma County will become even more so. Take a look at the VRBO, Airbnb, HomeAway, and other sites to see how many listings there are right now for Napa County. I think you'll be appalled. Here, for the most part, neighbors are neighbors, not visitors. Neighbors care about their homes and neighborhood. Visitors don't. Homeowners who are exposed to constant comings and goings do not feel they are living in a stable community. Neighbors have no idea who would be staying at the house next door, and the vacation renters have no knowledge of neighborhood rules and regulations, nor do they care, as they will be leaving in a few days to go back to their own homes. Where is the incentive for visitors to follow the rules regarding facility use? With transient rentals, there is the possibility of higher incidences of rule violation, including noisy parties. Once that long weekend or week is over, the home is ready for the next batch to rent. So even if you complain to the owner or HOA, their rental guests will be gone, probably never to return. So do you think they would really care if the neighbors are upset? They got their fee. Do you think a $100 fine is incentive when they get more than that per night? Lenders providing funds for buyers and for refinancing owners routinely require disclosure of the number of non-owner occupied residences as part of their underwriting procedures. And the tenant population in the development is used as a basis for determining whether such financing will be provided, the amount of cash deposit required, and the cost of funds. Liability and casualty insurance carriers for homeowner associations also require disclosure of tenant population as part of their underwriting procedures and presumably charge higher premiums or refuse to provide coverage for the association as the tenant population increases. Is Oakmont zoned for short-term or transient rentals? Are there laws prohibiting operation of a bed and breakfast or short-term transient accommodations? Is this a commercial use of property? How will property values and the ability of buyers to finance be affected if these short-term rental locations proliferate here in Oakmont? How does this use benefit our community? If it doesn't, it should be quelled. Oakmont's general HOA rules already forbid rentals of less than 30 days. The barn door is unlatching. Please don't wait until the horse is loose. Please take speedy enforcement action on this issue. Thanks.
Thank you for your thoughts. Sue?
I think that also it's a little bit dissembling to imply that there is no economic gain. A home exchange may not have cash exchanging hands, but you are getting an economic benefit because you're going to be able to go stay at somebody else's house and saving on vacation costs. So I think there is an economic bargain being made here, and home exchange should fall in the same category as short-term rentals.
I'm interested that you bring that up because one of the comments from legal counsel was this is in fact a commercial venture. There's nothing really free about it. And so it's one of the elements that the board is confronted with from a legal point of view, characterizing it as a commercial activity. Wally?
John, I think the board need look no further than the Kenwood newspaper and look at the police calls and note the number of problems Kenwood has with these overnight weekend short-term rentals, and we sure as hell don't want that here. So it's something you really need to address soon and finally. Enforcement, right.
Thank you.
My name is Ken, and I'm here about 2 years. I'm becoming very disappointed in Oakmont.
Would you pick up the microphone and hold it close to you? So,
Is that any better?
thank you.
Sorry, my name is Ken, I'm here about 2 years, okay? But I'm coming very disappointed in my choice of Oakmont as a place to retire. I looked at a lot of places and I moved here, and I moved here because it's an over 55 community, right? I didn't want children all the time. I have nothing against children, a grandchild, etc. But children living here, using facilities, is not what I purchased my house for, okay? Now I've heard stories of people renting for a day, 2 days, a weekend. I received something on next door, Oakmont Village. She had a house sitter for short term, and now she wants somebody to rent a room to her because she's so nice. I mean, it's becoming like a boarding facility. Give it another 6 months or a year, somebody's going to come to you and want to build a motel here for hourly and daily stays. It's getting ridiculous. I think the board has to review the entire situation, come out with a firm set of rules, and if they approve of a house exchange, it should be approved by the board who's going to come and live here. Somebody has to control something because everything's getting out of hand.
Thank you very much. That's one of the reasons we have workshops, to start gathering input. None of us on the board consider ourselves expert on the subject, but we do hear a lot about the implications of what residents
Hope you're against motels.
Thank you. One more.
Aren't some of these rentals also going through the local rental, real estate agencies? Yes.
Yes, they are.
What is being done to address that with those agencies directly and their agents that are basically violating our rules?
Well, one of the things that you see in the new issue of the Oakmont News is the publication of a draft policy on fines for violation of CC&Rs. Legal counsel has let us know that if a resident of Oakmont working in their real estate agent capacity contributes to the violation of that CC&R, those draft fine policies could well apply to them as well. So we'll just have to see how we go.
May I address this also?
Oh, please do.
My own personal view on it is that if a real estate agent knows that the short-term rental is in violation of the CC&Rs and they are actively violating the CC&Rs, it's a threat to their license with the Department of the Bureau of Real Estate. I don't want to get into names or anything, but there are certain agencies here that won't touch it with a 10-foot pole because it's been clarified that it's a significant issue and that shouldn't be dealt with by real estate agents. So that helps. I hope that clarifies the situation.
Any other board comments? Appreciate all your input. It's obviously not a subject that we're going to slapdash find answers to, but comments and discussion today I think is helpful to all of us. Item 4 on the agenda is being scrapped because we're not able to provide the color samples that we wanted to show you, and so that will come up at a later meeting. But with that, we stand adjourned.